Welcome to Asian Book Club, where we highlight Asian and Asian American authors. We are your hosts,
Jamae and Sabangan.
and I'm Stephen Park, and we are here with our third and last read of The Mythology Class by Arnold Are. And in this book, one of the things that we do see is a very specific scene, and it's the way that they get rid of one of the aswang, and it's that they turn this creature that, by day they're dogs, and so they turned this creature into what we presume is going to be food and meat for certain people.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, I thought this was curious because I grew up with a negative stereotype of Koreans eating dog. It's something that is used to tease and mock the people of my culture.
Which is the same in Filipino culture too. People tease Filipinos for eating dog or eating cat.
Right. And the thing is, it's not fully incorrect. In Korea, I have tried dog. It was one of my grandfather's actual favorite soups. And one of the reasons why it is a dish is because there were wartime moments where there wasn't meat available. Also, pigs have started growing, I think, after like more of a mass production. I think it was the 90s or so.
Mm.
But the livestock there or the other meat products wasn't vastly available. And
Mm.
especially if the country's in a point of destitution, sometimes you just gotta eat what's available.
Right.
So I don't know. I think when I look at it from an American lens, I get it. Like we have dogs as pets, and in Korea they have dogs as pets too. In the
Mm-hmm.
Philippines they have dogs as pets.
Yes.
So I get it from our culture because we kind of really idolize dogs, like more so than just see them as pets or creatures that bring us comfort.
Mm-hmm.
We look at them as almost, to some people, look at them as something that's greater than humans.
Mm. Also, the fact that they've been domesticated from wild animals.
Right, right, right.
So, like, the fact that they were domesticated is so that they can be these highly worshipped pets.
Right. A person's best friend kind of thing.
Yes.
I also see it from the standpoint, though, that there's a lot of foods that we've eaten, me and you growing up,
Yes.
that probably wouldn't be accepted in American culture. For me, it was like pig's feet or chokbal.
Mm.
It's also blood sausage, sundae, which I still love to this day. I also love chicken feet. It's a very particular structure that I don't think you could get from any other portion of meat.
For sure. Prior to my vegetarianism, I also loved chicken feet.
And you've also tried balut,
Yes.
which you
Balut is like, for those who don't know what it is, it's fertilized duck eggs where they stopped the fertilization by boiling the egg.
right, through different portions of the fertilization too. So you can have one that's like a baby and you
There's
don't.
one kind that you can fully distinguish the duck, and there are others where the duck's barely even seen.
Right. I don't know how people feel about this. I feel like we shouldn't judge people for their cultural habits of what they decide to eat.
Right.
I can see people reading this graphic novel and completely judging this moment of it, kind of being like, "Ugh, well, how gross or how disgusting."
Mm-hmm.
But let me tell you from the other end, Americans also didn't used to eat oxtail. They also didn't used to eat intestine. They
Right.
also didn't used to eat short ribs, I think. I think that was like a throwaway meat for a long time.
Mm-hmm. Also, lobsters used to be poor people food.
As it should be. They're like sea cockroaches.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I hope that people weren't judging this moment. I hope that people realize food is food,
Mm-hmm.
even if it's something that we're more familiar in a different light. But I just thought it was interesting to see that point in this story. And yeah.
Absolutely. I don't think I really put two and two together until I saw the knife that they pulled out, and I was like,
Mhm.
oh, I get it.
Yeah. Anyways, we are going to continue discussing our read. We have finished the mythology class, so I'm really excited to get into your thoughts. But before, let's talk about someone else that can get into our thoughts, and that's going to be our recommendation for the week.
Our recommendation for the week is Dr. Rona, who's a doctor of psychology. Dr. Rona is a mind body psychologist who focuses on decolonization and embodiment, as well as PhilAm, or Filipino American, and AAPI, mental health. What I appreciate the most about Dr. Rona are her Instagram posts where she delineates how us as Filipino Americans can view our upbringing through a lens that's able to reparent ourselves and make ourselves move forward. You can learn more about her work through her website at ronapsyd, that's RONAPSYD.com, and on Instagram at dr.rona, RONA.syd, PSYD.
Yep. And that's going to be our recommendation for the week. Okay. So we are on our third and last read of The Mythology Class by Arnold Ade. This week, we have read pages 114 through 226. And yeah, we finished the book. But before this read, what do we know about the story?
So, before we finish the book, the class captures almost all of the Encantos in their era, and during their farewell outing, they get swarmed by the aswang.
Right. And in this read, one of the big things that happens is that the Aswang are winning.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the ways that's seen is that Sitan is brought up to life in the form of a serpent.
Yes.
And this is kind of supposed to be their ultimate being, their mythological creature that is supposed to help them rule this world.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't quite go that way.
Well, it starts to look like it is going that way because they're intending to sacrifice half the class whom they've captured to the serpent.
Right. They're captured and bound.
Captured, bound, it looks like there's no way out, especially since their warriors are the ones who are all captured.
Right. And one of the things that gets them out of this situation is the help that they get from Lamang.
Mm-hmm.
But if you remember earlier in the read, the items that were supposed to go to the children from Lamang actually ended up in Nuno's hand.
Right.
And in this read, what we see is that Nuno actually ends up turning a corner. He goes, I think it's a he, Nuno,
I
this
think
being.
this, I'm gonna say he.
Yeah, let's say he. Hopefully that's his pronoun. Its pronoun. So he ends up going from this creature that is torturing Gina
Yes.
and now is turned around because Gina has pleaded for his help and has decided to actually help the kids.
I feel like Gina didn't just plead. I think she commanded him. Like, she was more in a state of mind where, no, you're not gonna keep on making me do things for you. I'm gonna make you do things for me now.
I see. That is actually a pretty big distinction because for me, thinking that Nuno finally turned around
Hmm.
seemed more like Nuno's decision, but
Hmm.
I can definitely see it as Gina finally being able to force that turnaround and make him start to work for her.
Right.
But he actually ends up being such a crucial part in this
Mm-hmm.
because one of the things that Nuno has to do is revive Mrs. Encanta.
Yes, because she has been injured by one of the Aswang, and none of the other students know what to do
Right,
except Nuno.
injured and cursed. Like there's a spirit that Nuno
Mm.
lifts off of Mrs. Encanta,
Uh-huh.
and that's what revives her.
Right.
And this kind of starts that fight back that the kids get to have.
For sure. I know that you said earlier that Nuno seemed to have made the decision, but do you think that the way that Nuno all of a sudden became, I guess you can say, obedient?
Mhm.
Does that feel like it's a cop out?
No, I mean, I can see how that's kind of viewed as the point, but I think with the story initially talking about Gina's role and that being unknown, and if Gina had the power to turn around Nuno, and Nuno never turns into a nice person. I think that's also the other big piece of it.
Mm.
He still seems like kind of like an a-hole.
No.
Like even though he's now helping Mrs. Encanta, it's
Mm-hmm.
not like he's all of a sudden a very nice person to the kids or anything like that. He's just like, okay, let me do something that's different than what I did. So I don't know. I don't see him as all of a sudden a great character. I just see him as on another side of this battle.
Fair, 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 fair.
So Nuno, like we said, is now helping the kids,
Mm-hmm.
which means that he's given them the four gifts of Lamont.
Yes.
And these four gifts are the leaf from the first tree, which is meant to be for protection from danger. And this was given to Lane.
Next is the wooden talisman of Dumakalam. Dumakalam is a hunter god, and this particular talisman unleashes the fighting spirit, which was given to Ailey.
Right. Another one was the seed of the sky god, which is the Idianale. I think that's pronounced that way. But it gives the powers of the east wind, and this was provided to Gina.
And the final one is the cloth of Manganganguai, which creates chaos and confusion among the enemy.
Right. And that one was given to Edward. There was one more gift, though, and that was the Blossom of Wealth,
Mm-hmm.
which is meant to give the reward to lift the fatigued soul.
Yes, and so this one isn't a fighting tool, but more of a Here you go after the end of the fight.
Right, exactly. But the kids end up really needing these talismans to get them out of this danger. And the first one that they use is the cloth of Manganguai.
Mangangaguay.
Yes, that one.
Well, let's first say how they're helping and who they're helping. So, these students with the four gifts from Lamang are at the Krishna Ligas, and they're trying to help the students who are captured by the Aswang who are in the Plaza of the Gods. They're totally different places.
Right. And Sulaiman is with the students that are endangered and tied up
Mm-hmm.
at the mall
At the Plaza of the Gods.
at the Plaza of the Gods. And the way that they're communicating, I think, is through Lane, or maybe it's through Lane and Eiley.
I think so, yes, because they're the ones with the telepathic powers.
Right,
And so, in order to help them, Mrs. Encanta brings them into the spiritual realm when she lights this candle.
right.
And by lighting this candle, this gives them the chance to burn whichever talisman from Lamang's gifts to save the students and Sulaiman who are in Plaza of the Gods.
Right.
Yes.
So this is where the cloth comes in handy.
Mm-hmm.
And so the cloth ends up giving them powers to where eventually a gunshot goes off and it turns the Aswang against their own god.
Kind.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the Satan, the serpent that they've risen,
Mm-hmm.
and they pretty much shoot down the serpent like all the way to death.
Or to sleeping, I think.
I think it's to death because later it shows the bones, and I know what you're thinking,
Hmm.
but it shows the bones of the serpent in one of the later clips,
For
so
sure, for sure.
I think it's dead.
Well, they're also shooting at each other, not only Satan.
Right, and this allows for the kids to break the ropes and then kind of start to run away.
Right. And then once the Aswang come to and they're realizing what they've done, then comes the second talisman.
Right, and we should say the talisman only lasts a certain amount of time. It lasts
Right.
for as long as it's burning.
Right.
And so, yeah, then comes the second talisman.
Which is then the leaf from the first tree.
Right, and the way that this is used is Gina ends up burning it, and as the children are backed out into a corner, she uses it to blow the Aswang out this window that just sends them off into nowhere.
Nowhere.
Like they're just
Yeah.
gone.
Yeah.
And it looks like a tall enough building that they probably died by hitting the ground.
Most likely.
Or at least our assumption is that's
That's
what
the
happened.
assumption for sure.
Right. So that saves them the second time. But also, I should say, it saves most of them. Because at this point, Misha and Ray are separated.
Mm-hmm.
So they kind of get blown by the wind of the god and they get sent to a whole separate floor. And so
Mm-hmm.
now we not only do we have the group now in the Cruz Nalagas, we also have the majority of the group in another corner of the Plaza of the Gods. And
Yes.
then now we have Misha and Ray also separated.
Right.
So this is where the third talisman comes in handy because the seed of Idianale ends up being used for Misha and Ray.
Mm-hmm.
So as Misha and Ray are trying to escape because the Aswang have found them, they end up finding themselves in a dead end, and all
Mm.
they have to escape is this rope.
Right. And at first they're pretty successful. They jump with the rope and the rope holds for a little bit until it snaps.
Right. And the funny thing I thought of was they are understanding that they're going to come to their death because they saw a 100-foot drop before they jumped on the rope.
Right.
And on their way down, Ray has the intention to blame Misha for the rope breaking.
Yeah, which is like super unfair for Misha.
Right. There's a lot of jokes against people that are overweight from Ray,
Which I do not like.
but we also know that he loves her. Like I feel
Yes.
like it's loving playfulness,
I don't think so.
which is it still seems abusive in a way. But anyways, I just thought that was a funny scene. But what the seed does is it gives them protection from death almost.
Right.
So they end up just landing on their feet and they're fine.
Right. They have that levity and they're floating down before they finally come to the ground,
Yeah. And so that leads us with the last talisman.
which is the wooden talisman of Demakulem.
Right. And that talisman ends up being used when the Aswang finally catch up with Sulaiman and the other kids.
Right.
So Sulaiman ends up kind of in a way being captured. He ends
Mm.
up showing off his own personal fighting spirit, saying, I'm not going to go down like this, and starts taking on a massive group of Aswang.
Mm-hmm.
The kids are trying to help,
Right.
especially the fighters who are Gio and Sam.
Mm-hmm.
And so, pretty much for the most part, we have Sulaiman, Gio, and Sam taking on maybe 20 Aswang. It's a lot.
Right. A lot of aswang.
And so, this is where the talisman comes in handy, and Ailey plays it, and it gives them weapons.
Mm-hmm.
Not to mention, it also gives Ray a weapon to defend him and Misha off from an Aswang as well.
For sure.
And this pretty much starts creating their freedom to get away.
Mm-hmm.
Along with it, Ray and Misha end up finding a getaway car that's this extremely futuristic, ultimately powerful car that can make like 20-foot jumps and everyone survives.
Mm.
They pick up the other kids and Sulaiman who are in the Plaza of the Gods and
Yes.
they're able to get away.
Yes.
Also incorporated within this getaway is Nicole,
Mm-hmm.
who ends up using her Katniss Everdeen skills to
Yes.
kill off a ton of Aswang with just I don't know which I remember her going through this process of trying the bow and arrows and she was uniquely good at it,
Mm-hmm.
but she
I
hit
feel
like
like it.
everyone on target.
I was gonna say that her targeting was so on cue for every single aswang.
Right. And that was one of the big roles that Nicole plays. But the other portion of Nicole that we see is she gets her love interest back.
Yes, because Tala resurrects Kubin using his sword that was in the museum.
Right. And one thing I didn't notice on our first read was that Kubin's Chris was
Mm-hmm.
mentioned in the very beginning.
Yep.
And one of the initial things that was mentioned is that it heals the wielder of the sword.
Mm-hmm.
And clearly that was meant as a premonition for what would happen later.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I should have seen that coming in our last read when I said, is Kuven going to survive? And wasn't
Mm-hmm.
sure of it, but it was very clearly written by Arnold Ade that Kuben was supposed to be revived.
Yes, absolutely.
So Kuben takes his sword that resurrects him and he goes to town on all the other Aswang. He
Yes.
is able to cut them all down. He is kind of off on his own, but making his way to the Plaza of the Gods.
Yes. And by the time he gets to the Plaza of the Gods, that's when Nicole's there as well.
Right. And so from there, he reunites with her.
Yes.
They both end up being somewhat safe until we see the resurrection of the snake.
Mm-hmm.
So, one thing that we should mention is that Nicole, in a vision, saw Lamang, and
Mm-hmm.
Lamang gave her three premonitions.
Yes.
So, one of the premonitions was that there was a horse being chased and kind of sandwiched by two boars while they were escaping.
Mm-hmm.
The other one was a dragon trying to swallow a living sword and dying.
Mm-hmm.
And the last one was a dying dog that was illuminated by the sun. Now, we saw all three premonitions come true by the end of this book, and it was kind of
Yes.
right at the end of this book.
Right, right at the end.
Right. And so the horse being chased and sandwiched by two boars, that was when the kids were escaping, and there was a
Mm-hmm.
monster truck or semi truck or something that ran into another car that were both driven by Aswang, and the kids were
Mm-hmm.
able to
To
escape to
escape.
safety. We see the premonition of the dragon swallowing a living sword when Kubin was actually being apprehended by the lead Aswang who had turned into Sitan's creature, which was a resurrection of the snake.
Yes.
And so Kuben is able to escape by using his Chris to kill off the snake, which is kind of one of the more final endings of the Swang
Mm.
until we get to the third premonition, which is the dying dog that is illuminated by the sun.
Mm.
And this was that scene that we talked about where the dog ends up being picked off by three other people that throw them in a food truck that
Yeah.
we are assuming is going to be eaten in some delicious
Mm.
fashion, like dog adobo or
Or something of
I
that
don't know,
nature.
cinnadog,
Okay.
not cinnabon.
No, not the same thing.
No. This kind of wraps up the story of how the kids end up taking down the Swang.
Yes. And at the end, when there are no more talismans, the last gift from Lamang is the blossom. And Nuno uses the blossom to be burned by the candle that Mrs. Encanto used to help with the fight. And the reward for everyone was this huge room full of gold.
Right. And the kids end up not really using the gold. They kind of bury it deep. Eventually, they start spreading it out, and everyone just kind of goes their own way. Lane ends up opening a coffee shop.
Lane and Misha end up opening up a coffee shop where Lane uses her psychic powers.
Right, right. We also see that Geo, Sam, and Ray kind of become vigilantes that are spreading justice throughout the Philippines. And
Yes.
tying up bad guys.
Specifically in Manila.
Right, right. And last but not least, we see Mrs. Encanta leave with her warriors to go into another timeline, but Kuben doesn't go.
No, Kuben is heartsick, and Mrs. Encanta says the only way that we'll be able to fight off more Encantos in the future is if you and Nicole make them.
Well, she says we'll never be able to find a warrior like you. She says in all the timelines, I don't think we'll ever find someone that will be able to defeat and contest quite like you. But if there was a way, it would be if, yes, if Kuben and Nicole make Bibis. So that comes to like this beautiful ending of love conquering and the children going through their mission and kind of defeating everything. We see that this almost looks like an imaginary tale at the end because the building disappears that they were originally doing all
Right,
of the activities in.
right. Krishna becomes just this construction site.
Right, which goes into the fact that this is mythology.
Right, exactly.
What did you feel about this book? Like, did you have any final thoughts or opinions on the read?
I definitely had a high after finishing the read. It felt like I went through an entire adventure with these college kids.
Mm-hmm. I thought the ending was a little cheesy, but I get it. Like, you kind of need
Mm,
that in a story. You see it in Marvel movies. You see the hero's journey end with that calming factor rather than ending on that extreme high of defeating the bad people.
which was necessary because each of these college students had their own way of living at the beginning, so they also had to return to their old lives in order to see the change that happened in them.
Right. The issues that I had was Nuno,
Mm,
because, like you mentioned, he turned to the good side, let's say.
right.
But man, Nuno was awful. The way that he tortured Gina, I don't
Exactly.
know if that should ever be excused.
No.
Like, I feel like him turning into a good character after seeing his negative characteristics in that way,
Exactly.
the only thing I can think of is both the Philippines and Korea do come from a culture of massively patriarchal societies where I wouldn't say accepted, but that was ignored for a long time.
Yes.
So, not good.
Not
And
great.
I did not enjoy that part very much.
Mm-hmm.
The other part I thought was weird was Nicole got another dog.
She did.
Yeah, like at the very end, she got like another white dog.
Yes,
It's
you're
like,
right.
what is wrong with you? I get that you destroyed the aswang, but like, go get a cat, Nicole. Come on now. Like, why would you get another dog? I don't know. But I'm assuming that you enjoyed most of this book,
I
or maybe
did.
all of the book.
I did enjoy reading this book. I think if we didn't split it up into different parts, I would have sped read through the whole thing.
Yeah. Who would you recommend this book to?
The first person that came to mind is recommending this book to my brother because he loves manga and reading comics. And so I think not only would my brother enjoy this, but I think anyone who likes Marvel movies, like you said,
Mhm.
I would recommend this to all my Filipinx friends
Mhm.
because it's a must read.
Yeah, I think for me, I really enjoyed this book. I don't think there were too many lulls in the story. The story moved extremely quickly. The plot lines connected well. The only one I didn't like was Nuno's story, but everything
Mm-hmm.
else seemed very much like it flowed. The
Yes.
characters were very much distinguished. I still don't remember all of their names by heart,
No.
but I knew which character was which.
Yes.
I'm so glad that Bob maintained the Tagalog language all throughout the read.
Mm-hmm.
That character never changed and all of a sudden spoke English or, ended up being written in English.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I think the first person that comes to mind in terms of recommending this book to would be my nephew. So, my
Mm-hmm.
nephew is half Korean and half Filipino, and I don't think he has a lot of sense of his own culture. And he does like to read. And I think comics are such a good way to get kids interested in different things.
Absolutely.
And the way the story is written, there's so much actual Filipino history within the storylines. And I think just an introduction that isn't a force feeding of learn this and this and this,
Mhm.
but more, hey, these are some characters. And maybe starting to be like, oh, I wonder who Bathala is, or I wonder
Right.
what Aswang are, or all this stuff might get him interested in learning more about who he is.
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, that and Yeah, like you said, I would recommend this to a lot of Filipino people because same reason, like get to learn your culture without feeling like you're learning your culture.
Yes.
Other people would really enjoy reading this book too.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, absolutely. From the standpoint of trying to learn who we are and who we've come from,
Yes.
I mean that from like me with my Korean culture and other people with their Filipino culture, I think
Yes.
this would be an easy way to start learning that.
I agree.
Awesome. That brings the end of the mythology class by Arnold Are. I know he has, I think, a couple other graphic novels.
He has a few graphic novels other than the mythology class.
Yeah, and they're all kind of drawn in a very similar style. So if you enjoyed this book, make sure to catch up with some of his other works because I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure they're all going to be really great.
Definitely. And if you're still not sure if you want to read the books, you should definitely see the trailer that he animated and also created the visual effects for.
Yeah. But for us, we are going to move on into our next book, and that's going to be my pick.
Yes.
So for our next book, it's going to be Crazy Rich Asians. So, for our hints of jam, the three reasons why I kind of really wanted to start diving into this book is one is it's going to be a lighter read, and that's what we've kind of been looking for after some of our
Mm-hmm.
heavier ones. I am after mythology class kind of looking forward to some of the other darker books that we have in line,
Yes.
not necessarily for the darkness, but for the topics that they're going to bring up.
Yes.
So I think these reads are doing the job that they need to do. The second reason I can provide is because Crazy Rich Asians as a trilogy commanded the top three positions of the New York Times bestseller list for a couple of weeks. Like all three books were leading
Mm.
that list, which is insane.
Wow.
And then last but not least, me and you loved this movie.
Yes, Me and You by me, Jamae, and Steven.
Right. Jamae has watched this movie
So
like
many
at
times.
least five, six times. For her, it's like a very feel good, easy movie.
It is.
I've watched this movie at least four times, and one of the reasons why we're also reading this book is to use it as an excuse to watch the movie again.
Yes, please.
So let's learn a little bit more about the author. The author is Kevin Kwan. He was a Singapore born American, and in 2014, he was named as one of the five writers to watch by The Hollywood Reporter. And in 2018, he was listed as one of the top 100 most influential people on Time magazine. So, to find out more about the book, let's read the back cover.
Mm-hmm.
When New Yorker Rachel Chu agrees to spend the summer in Singapore with her boyfriend, Nicholas Young, she envisions a humble family home and quality time with the man she hopes to marry. But Nick has failed to give his girlfriend a few key details. One, that his childhood home looks like a palace. Two, that he grew up riding in more private planes than cars. And three, that he just happens to be the country's most eligible bachelor. On Nick's arm, Rachel may as well have a target on her back the second she steps off the plane. And soon her relaxed vacation turns into an obstacle course of old money, nosy relatives, and scheming social climbers. I'm excited.
I'm excited too.
I know you've been wanting to read this story for a while.
For a long while now.
I'm not sure. Me and Jamae have gone back and forth on whether we're going to do the entire trilogy all at
Mm.
once or if we're going to kind of break it up as we go. Honestly, we might just see how it goes after the first read and get
Yes.
hooked and just do all three at once. But we'll see. We got to start with our first read. And that first read is going to be,
From pages 1 to 92. For everyone, that's chapters 1 through 11.
yep. And so we're excited for you to read with us. We're hoping that you enjoyed the mythology class. And if you had any thoughts or opinions to share, we'd love to hear it. And how can people do that?
Y'all can email us at asianbookclubpod@gmail.com or join us in conversation on Instagram at asianbookclubpod.
And we have our website, which is asianbookclubpod.com, that has our bookstore that includes the mythology class and other books that we've read in the past, books that we recommend, and books that we plan to read in the future.
Mm-hmm. And a great way to support us is to rate, review, and subscribe.
Yep, otherwise, make sure to be happy, be healthy, and read a book.
Ingat! Bye!
Bye.